The VTuber is a monstrous cyborg that looms large over the internet. Defying easy definition or comprehension, the VTuber crosses boundaries and challenges basic assumptions about persona, technology, and the world. The word cyborg may seem dated in 2021, but it's actually relatively recent. It originated in a 1960 article by Manfred Clynes and Nathan Kline, discussing the adaptations we may need to explore space.
If a fish wished to live on land, it could not readily do so. If, however, a particularly intelligent and resourceful fish could be found, who had studied a good deal of biochemistry and physiology, was a master engineer and cyberneticist, and had excellent lab facilities available to him, this fish could conceivably have the ability to design an instrument which would allow him to live on land and breathe air quite readily.
This article should be read in the context of the 1960s, when space travel seemed like it was just around the corner, not just sending scientists to the ISS or rich a-holes to the upper atmosphere, but an entirely new age of exploration. However, fast forward several decades and it's becoming abundantly clear that space travel is both far more expensive and far more dangerous than first imagined. Combine that with the collapse of the Soviet Union and subsequent end of the space race, and the will to explore the new frontier gradually waned, and with it, so faded Clynes and Kline's dream of the spacefaring cyborg. But the cyborg itself didn't die. Donna Haraway's essay, A Cyborg Manifesto, is one of those readings you get in college, where you're pretty sure it's saying something important, but in a way that makes you feel really dumb. I should also note that the author of the reading notes I used for Cyborg Manifesto was Theresa Senft, who is a writer that I've actually cited in a previous video. Theresa, you are a godsend. Thank you so much for your work. It doesn't help that Haraway's writing style often verges into the near incomprehensible, with a lot of poetry and metaphor.
Modern machinery is an irreverent upstart god, mocking the father's ubiquity and spirituality. The silicone chip is a surface for writing. It is etched in molecular scales distributed only by atomic noise, the ultimate interference for nuclear scores.
A common theme in Haraway's essay is the cyborg's ability to confound boundaries and binary distinctions. The manifesto actually generated a fair amount of controversy when it was first released, because it seemed to take aim at a lot of the established beliefs of contemporary Marxist feminism, specifically the dualisms that underlie the base assumptions of the movement.
There is nothing about being female that naturally binds women. There is not even such a state as being female, itself a highly complex category constructed in contested sexual scientific discourses and other social practices. For me, and for many who share a similar historical location in white, professional middle class, female, radical, North American, mid-adult bodies, the sources of a crisis in political identity are legion. The recent history for much of the U.S. left and U.S. feminism has been a response to this kind of crisis, mindless splitting and searches for a new essential unity.
Haraway's critiques, though, shouldn't be confused with modern right-wing criticisms of identity politics, which are primarily concerned with erasing historical injustice and present inequality. And while I can't delve too deeply into Haraway's work, her main concern is with developing a feminist cyborg identity that rejects strict boundaries and rules. For Haraway, the cyborg is a monster, emergent from patriarchal capitalist society that confounds our basic notions about reality with potentially revolutionary implications. The book From Counterculture to Cyberculture tells of how countercultural movements in the US envisioned the liberating potential of space colonies that were nonetheless premised on the same technologies and militarism that these revolutionaries were actually fighting to oppose.
For the readers of CQ, space colonies served as a rhetorical prototype. They allowed former new communalists to transfer their longings for a communal home to the same large-scale technologies that characterized the Cold World technocracy they had sought to undermine.
And just like how Clynes and Kline's Cyborg enabled a utopian yet inherently militaristic vision of exploration, so too does the VTuber enable an exploration of an entirely new kind of space, cyberspace, not just as a slave to a machine, but as a being wholly integrated with a system.
If man in space, in addition to flying his vehicle, must continuously be checking on things and making adjustments merely in order to keep himself alive, he becomes a slave to the machine. The purpose of the cyborg, as well as his own homeostatic systems, is to provide an organizational system in which such robot-like problems are taken care of automatically and unconsciously, leaving man free to explore, to create, to think, and to feel.
And what are Clynes and Kline describing, if not the implementation of Live 2D in live streaming, a technology that allows seamless integration with cyberspace? As I've talked about in a previous video, monsters aren't just scary stories. They exist with a purpose, as a warped reflection of reality. Monsters are a way of reading culture that reject neat boundaries and categories.
We live in an age that has rightfully given up on unified theory, an age when we realize that history, like individuality, subjectivity, gender, and culture, is composed of a multitude of fragments, rather than of smooth epistemological wholes.
To bring this back to the original subject, what can VTubers tell us about our modern condition? If VTubers are not only cyborgs, but monstrum, then what do these figures reveal? I think an important aspect of VTubers is their immortality. A VTuber never truly dies. They never truly permanently go away. They just graduate. The rhetorical framing of a graduation implies the existence of a world in which the VTuber continues to exist. They never truly disappear, they're just transformed. Indeed, there are many cases where the actor behind the avatar will reappear in a new body. The VTuber always escapes. The ending is always open-ended. This extends to how VTuber graduations usually affect the channels themselves. Many VTubers will partially or completely wipe the archives of their videos and live streams, leaving only fragmentary evidence that they ever existed at all. They leave behind footprints and bones in the form of the clips that we save, the stories we tell, the signifiers of monstrous passing that stand in for the monstrous body itself.
We see the damage the monster wreaks. The material remains, but the monster itself turns immaterial and vanishes, to reappear somewhere else. No matter how many times King Arthur killed the ogre of Mount St. Michael, the monster reappeared in another heroic chronicle, bequeathing the Middle Ages an abundance of Mort d'Arthurs.
The integration of humanity with virtuality, the adoption of persona and a live 2D skin, the VTuber doesn't fit neatly into traditional concepts of performance. Hololive has famously played to this effect, with their members alternately casting themselves as idols or comedians, when in reality they don't fit neatly into either category. Nor are social categories like gender immune to the radical changes brought about by the adoption of the cyborg VTuber. Many VTubers differ not only in appearance, but in gender from their actors. In this way, the cyborg permits the exploration not only of a cyberspace, but of a social space, the space of gender identity and performance. The English-speaking VTuber space is especially a place of trans and non-binary visibility, where open rejection of traditional gender norms and sexual orientations is commonplace and, in large part, accepted.
The refusal to participate in the classificatory order of things is true of monsters generally. They are disturbing hybrids whose externally incoherent bodies resist attempts to include them in any systemic structuration, and so the monster is dangerous, a form suspended between forms that threatens to smash distinctions.
The term VTuber itself is one that resists easy classification. I refer to VTubers here, assuming you know what I mean, but do you? The high-budget edited 3D videos of Kizuna Ai and the admittedly lower-budget 2D animation of the Eileen family were both at one point considered VTubers, but that's not what the word conjures in the mind today. In a previous video, I discussed the uncanny nature of Pokemon's VTuber avatar and the disturbed reactions it evoked. This monstrous entity which was neither human nor machine but a twisted hybrid. This reflects the ways in which fault lines on the internet expand into cultural rifts. The fear that comes with the perceived invasion of a fandom space by outsiders emerges in a revulsion towards the strange and uncanny that monsters so often represent. Wherever there are differences, others, monsters exist to fill those gaps. Many VTubers will highlight their differences, creating lore and backstories, elaborate fictions to separate themselves as other. But we still watch VTubers. We engage with them and eat up that sense of uncanniness and strangeness. Even those VTubers engaged in social taboos, displays of gender or sexuality that are regarded unjustly by some as unacceptable, are broadly appealing. The VTuber can act out wild fantasies in the liminal space between the borders of a web browser, unbothered by the world at large. It's an unfortunate fact that the revolutionary potential of VTubers is probably quite limited, because, well, much like the new communalists, these VTubers are relying on existing technologies. The corporatized VTuber environment, the commodification of audiences and art, not to mention the private control by a few rich individuals of the very platforms that VTubers rely on for their income. But that said,
the main trouble with cyborgs, of course, is that they are the legitimate offspring of militarism and patriarchal capitalism, not to mention state socialism. But illegitimate offspring are often exceedingly unfaithful to their origins. Their fathers, after all, are inessential.
the cyborg nature of VTubers is multifaceted and, at times, horrific. But it's also the reason that VTubing is so fascinating. The unique intersection of mediums and technologies creates a new space for performance and identity in the 21st century that many find not only appealing, but necessary in the socially limiting environment of the COVID-19 pandemic. VTubers never die. They express gender and sexuality in new and exciting ways. They cross borders effortlessly and call into question every assumption we've had about our social connections and the online world. The uncertainty that they raise can certainly be uncanny, terrifying even, as many monsters are. However, they're also revealing. Happy Halloween.
Solving the many technological problems involved in manned spaceflight by adapting man to his environment rather than vice versa will not only mark a significant step forward in man's scientific progress, but may well provide a new and larger dimension for man's spirit as well.